And we are live. Welcome to the Second Chance Live series, where we are featuring experts in their industry as a means to share their goodness with the world, because we believe that the best way for you to fulfill your highest potential in life is to learn from some of the best, most successful, most generous, most loving people in the world. And I have one of those people right here as one of my guests. His name is Dr. Phil Adler. Now, I am especially excited for Phil to join us today because Phil is the first guest to be on the show who's actually in my book. Yes, and we're gonna get into that a little later. He got a little love in the book, so it's been a while since I read the last revision, but I'm not sure if I said your name, but maybe I did. Either way, you're in there, and now people are going to know it's talking about you. I want to encourage you as we dig into all of his brilliant mind and his research that he's done, and how he's supporting athletes and their mental health, their physical health. I encourage you right now just to host a watch party if you're watching on Facebook. That will notify everyone who's following you that this is content worth listening to, watching to, or if you're driving and you just got it on as background music because you love the sound of my voice. So go ahead and host a watch party. And if you're on another platform, just click that share button. We appreciate it. Let me read Phil's bio to you so that we can get into this content. So Dr. Adler is currently the operations manager for Spectrum Health Medicine program in Grand Rapids, Michigan, as well as adjunct instructor at Allied Health for Davenport University, which I did some work there, by the way.
Cool.
He was the head athletic trainer of football for Central Michigan University, which is where he and I met, from 2004 to 2011. Prior to this position, he served as outreach athletic trainer for both Mount Pleasant and Beal City Schools. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Athletic Training and Master of Arts in Sports Administration from Central Michigan University. Adler obtained his doctorate in education from Capella University in 2017. That's when he became a trader. I'm just kidding. His dissertation focused on the importance of athletic healthcare team for urban secondary schools and keeping athletes engaged in their injury rehabilitation process to prevent both academic and interscholastic athletic disengagement, which is what I really want to dig into that today.
Yeah.
So Phil, I'm really excited that you're on today, man. I know I hit you up in a roundabout way to support what we're doing to raise funds, which you guys can find out about at secondchanceathletes.com. But man, I'm excited to share your genius with the world, man. And so thank you for coming on today. Man, give us a little update on maybe what you're currently working on, and then let's go back into some of those CMU days.
Yeah, absolutely. Darryll, I want to thank you for reaching out and re-engaging. I think that in this day and age, we watch social media and we watch what people are doing, and it's really opportunities like these to reconnect, to really be able to give back and find out what's important, what people are doing, and being able to participate and to help support you and to help support other athletes as they go through similar experiences, as they have similar experiences to maybe what you and others had. It's really, I feel blessed to be able to be on with you today. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and look forward to a little bit of dialogue.
Wow.
So my current position in it really leans on my athletic training experience, and our goal with Spectrum Health Sports Medicine and Outreach Athletic Training is really to put licensed healthcare professionals and athletic trainers in schools for the maximum amount of time that we can, to really be able to help educate student athletes about options they have, about their body, about the rehabilitation process, to help guide families through the healthcare process. And it's very similar to what I was doing at Central Michigan, but I would say at the high school level, we don't always have that guide. We don't have somebody that can create seamless healthcare, who can create collaborative opportunities between physicians and physical therapists and specialists and radiology and expedite care. And the overarching goal was to bring what we did at Central Michigan and providing that day-to-day healthcare, those frequent touch bases with student athletes, take that to the high school and take that into our communities, because it's really creating those healthcare opportunities that are going to prevent that disengagement, to prevent those injuries from becoming obstacles for success.
Right.
So that's really what my goal is now. And there's other parts of the program and things like that, but my passion has always been to serve the community, to serve student athletes, to serve the families in our athletic healthcare in athletics, and really integrate into those communities as best we can.
Man, phenomenal, man. Dude, I came to Central Michigan 2008, and I came during the summer. Like I had no summer. Like I graduated from high school and we got in there early. Do you remember me my freshman year, or what's like your first memory of how awesome I was?
Yeah, so I would say my first memory was kind of this thin, gangly, like, really energetic guy, who thought he could dominate, and really had just an enthusiasm and love for the game. There was definitely talent. But again, the perspective, right? 2008, you're coming in off of two back-to-back championships in 2006, 2007. We're now in the second year of a new head coach. And so we've kind of got things down. I mean, I started in 2004 under one coach, had a few years, and so I've kind of got a rhythm. And I wouldn't take this the wrong way, but you were just one of my freshmen, right?
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
a guy
yeah.
that the question was, is how much am I going to have to put under my wing and guide this dude? Or is this going to be, is he just going to be, one of these guys that's just a gamer and takes off and I never see him? And
Yeah.
you don't know, right? And so all I know is that as guys come in like yourself that have the passion, the energy, the desire, the heart, um, how do we do everything we can to feed that desire and that passion, but at the same time protect you from yourself? And so a lot of times, though, that first summer, it's looking at guys and trying to gauge, how do I get to know him? How do I reach him? Because at some point in time, I'm going to need to. And so it's a lot of, okay, across my other duties and things, it's what does this individual, what is he going to need from me, to reach his journey and to reach his goals and dreams.
Yeah, yeah, man. I was not just another freshman.
And well,
Dude,
but in
my
2008, though,
ego,
you
my ego.
came in. There was a lot of you really talented, and
I
if
traveled.
you did, you were on the travel squad, and
That automatically puts me in the top 10% of the freshmen.
what the top 10%, so 65 travel out of
Yeah.
105, and any given year we had 10 to 15 injuries,
Mhm.
and so not to deflate you, Stins, but in any
Yeah,
given year, there was a high probability that we were going to travel some talented freshmen. And so to have that
yeah.
growth opportunity, at that time,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
turning my light down. I'm seeing a lot.
yeah.
There we go. It was really phenomenal. But again, I think that when you look at the perspective of where I was at that time and what we had to tend to, in
Mhm.
2008 was one of those years that as I look back, the wheels came off. The wheels
Yeah,
came off at the Ball State game. There was a Wednesday night game, and we had played at Northern. Oh my gosh, can you believe? I'm gonna reminisce. I'm gonna go back on you now. So
yeah,
we were at Northern Illinois the week prior,
mhm,
and the wheels started to fall off with injuries and things like that.
yeah.
And then the following week, we wore those godforsaken, Vegas gold jerseys,
I knew you were gonna say that.
and I mean they were cool at the time, maybe for a day, but the wheels came off in that Ball State game, and that as we frame memories, as we look at, I can fill this whole, we could fill 2-3 hours worth of memories and things, but
Right.
2008 was memorable because there was a lot of guys that were beat up, and there was a lot of guys that were hurt,
Yeah,
and injured, and some key players, and so I think there were some guys like yourself that may have had to play too soon, right? You
yeah,
you didn't get to grow as athletes. You didn't get to grow and mature as college students and adapt to both, college life and balance and school and football.
Yeah.
And despite your best efforts and passion and talents, that's a lot to put on a freshman their
For
first
sure.
year to travel, to be healthy, to learn the playbook, to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Knowing that you've got a group of veteran guys ahead of you that have won 2 championships, um, despite talent and passion,
Mhm.
that's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
mentally for a young student athlete.
Yeah, and it is. And one of the things that I think will be helpful for guests, especially those that are watching this replay, because it's a really interesting conversation to look at an athletic trainer and an athlete in their relationship, right? And even how
Mhm.
ours has evolved over time. But I know as a current athlete that especially as a freshman and sophomore, it's almost like athletics. The way I view you and our athletic trainers was kind of like the people, like the bad news bearers, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a little too hurt to play, or you probably should take
Yeah.
it easy. And I obviously have grown and recognize that that's not the case now. But I'd love for you to just talk about that dynamic relationship and what are some of the challenges of being the person that has to, kind of fight for the physical health of the athlete at the expense sometimes of the team.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Where do we start? I think that so let's take this in chunks, right? We're gonna have to break this down because that's a heavy lift to
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about. I think the first and foremost is the student athlete is always at the center of the discussion, and they have to be because you're the one that is most important. And so what I would say is that of all of the injuries and all of the processes, it is a process. And at times, I think you guys would look at me and because the first thing I would do, and I don't know if we can do this anymore, but what we used to do is I used to put my arm around you, and the first thing I would tell you is going to be okay. I
Hmm.
gotcha. And most of the time, I don't think you guys believe me.
Hmm.
But what I knew is I knew what the process was.
Right.
And I knew the things we had to do to get you better. And I also often, because we had some fantastic physicians and other staff members with us, I also knew the care that you were going to get, and it was going to be second to none. And we were going to provide the best that we could at the time. And so the first thing that always would go through my mind is physically, have we managed it? Are you safe?
Hmm.
Is everything under control, or is this something we need to manage? But once I knew that physically you guys were safe, I would immediately start it to tackle the mental side of an injury immediately. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social worker, but I knew enough about my athletes to know which guys I just need to let sit on the bench and
Hmm.
which guys I was going to need to spend a little bit more time with. Um, because of where they were at. So it was really first what's going through the athlete's head. How do we manage this? How do we make sure you understand the process? How do we connect parents if parents are involved? If parents aren't involved, what's the process? Who's going to become that caregiver, the nurturer? Who's going to be able to support that individual in the process? Where were parents? And correct me if I'm wrong, Saginaw. That where did
Jackson.
where were parents? What's that?
I'm from Jackson, if that's what you're
Jackson.
asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
went to Saginaw. We took a couple trips to Saginaw if I remember
Oh
correctly.
yeah, yeah. That's where I did my surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we connect with parents? How do we connect with the people that are going to be the supporters? The next part was the medical process and making sure that was sound. But then it was talking to the coaches, and I would say that early on in talking to coaches, to use one of the terms from one of our former coaches is I had a little bit of unconscious incompetence. I didn't know I didn't know because college football was much different than high school athletics and things like that, and the stakes were much higher. And so, um, I think that a lot of times, early on in my career, um, not that I didn't have the best interest of the athlete at hand. It was I didn't communicate that well enough to coaches and what have you. And as I grew as a professional, as I grew as an athletic trainer, it became very easy to look at a coach and just say no. The answer is
Mhm.
no. And I don't care how many ball games you think you're going to win or lose with this person. The answer is just no because in my heart of hearts, I've never sacrificed the health, safety, and well being of a student athlete for a football game, a spring ball game, or anything like that. And I think we've talked about, and we had, I think with every single athlete, that what we talk about was, this is today, and it feels like your life is crashing in around you. It feels like everything you've worked for it's slipping away, but you have we're not loading you into an ambulance intubated, right? We're not talking life or death in 98% of the situations.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a scholarship, so you're getting an education, and you
Mm-hmm.
have an entire life ahead of you. And I'm going to quote Dr. Thomas Keating. There's three things that we can't fool around with: is head, heart, and spine. And the last thing we pledged every day, the last thing we wanted to do was see anybody, um, and this is a little crude, but it's what he used to use to impact you guys. The last thing we want to do is have you guys sitting in a wheelchair, rolling around with your tongue hanging out, drooling on yourself. And I mean that not in a disrespectful manner. And I mean that,
Mm-hmm.
with all consideration, but sometimes we have to hit you guys with impactful things. And I can remember guys actually, you actually said that?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't say it because it's disrespectful to those individuals that are in that situation,
Right.
but we didn't want you in that situation. And so a lot of times it's, look, this is what we've got right now. This is how we're going to handle it, and this is where we're going to go. And so if you let me, um, we can conquer this together.
Mm. Man, that's so powerful. And I want to come back to that moment and get specifically into my injury and that whole process because it's so ingrained into my story. But I get asked this question all the time, and we did a blog post about it. We've got to republish it on our new site about athletes dealing with injury. And I get probably, I don't know, man, every other week a question about a parent that's concerned for their athlete who's got hurt and they want to come back and play, but they don't know if they should, whether it's a concussion or a knee. What would your advice be to parents who care so much about their athlete, but the athlete may be just driven for success in sports? What would some of your advice be on how to deal with an injury?
Yeah. So um, science matters,
Mm-hmm.
and evidence matters. And I think that what we know now in certain things is as literature and evidence and science evolves, so does our ability to care for people. And what I often will look at, and I still do in my job today, it's not unusual to help with parent phone calls or education and whatnot. And it's this is the best evidence that we have to help care for your son or daughter. And one game or two games or sometimes an entire season is not worth the rest of their life. And the decisions we make early on, the options we choose may impact the future livelihood, the future success of your son or daughter. And so I think sometimes parents are almost more driven and more irrational than the athletes, and that doesn't help the student athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, really, in communicating its truth, making sure that I'm truthful with the evidence that I'm presenting, and having the support of the physicians and the other caregivers, and then working with the parents on what are the options, because I think too often it's cut and dry. Either yes you can or no you can't. And what
Mm-hmm.
we did a lot at Central, at least when I was there, it was, how do we manage the in between? Because there's going to be some times when the answer is just no.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't. And the answer isn't quite yes. But if I say yes, I know Darryll Stinson's going to hit that football field and go 110 miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah,
But I also know his body can't.
yeah,
He
yeah.
might not know that. He might not. And so what did we do? Sometimes we have to show parents, right? Well, okay, mom, okay, dad, we've got an ankle. Let's see how good they are, right? Let's be safe. Let's just do some functional testing, some things that we progress, and then we finally go, look, mom, dad, they can't protect themselves. They're not functional. They're not competitive. And doing that in a safe, respectful manner, I think we do a lot of show and tell. It's a lot of education and a lot of communication. And I think that's where I've been successful with parents and student athletes is, look, I get it. I want you to play. My goal is not to hold you out because that's more work for me, right?
Yeah.
If I've got a whole med squad of guys or I've got a whole med squad of gals on the sideline and I've got to find alternate activity for everybody to do to keep you in shape and to keep you going, that's not where you want to be and that's not where I want you to be. So help me help you get you back. And I think once parents realize that and realize that, again, it goes back to systems and processes and being consistent. So I think that's where we really tried to make the most impact.
Yeah, you guys did a phenomenal job in retrospect for me. And as an athlete, you're just a bad guy trying to tell me that I couldn't play. But I think that there's something to be said about that. And um, I this is probably the last thing I'll say here, and I want to move into specifically the injury and kind of go there for
Sure.
a second. But but there's something to be said about these stories that we hear as athletes, and some of it plays into athlete identity, right? Like athlete identity is like this blinder. Like the more fused your identity is, I think is the correct term, the harder it is to see beyond and hear sound advice like what you're sharing. And for me, I know when I had my back injury and it was all okay, you've got a golden ticket, you can, focus on your education, you can come around football whenever you want. All I kept studying was all this comeback stories of all the athletes who rehabilitated from injuries. They said they were too short. They said they would never come back and be as good as they once were. And I couldn't help but to think of my father's own story, who hurt his knee and came back stronger from a kney injury and then ended up getting hurt again.
I
But
remember we talked about that quite a bit.
so I was trying not to repeat father's failures. And so I don't know, man. I think what I'm saying is like we just have to address the reality that sometimes athletes are stubborn and they feel like, and sometimes these stories we tell, it feels like you're going to be the one to have that story as well.
Yeah. It's interesting as I think back on your injury specifically and as we talk about it, um, it, we did everything we could to give you a chance to rehabilitate and to get on the field. And sometimes I think it's as equally frustrating for those of us that in the back of our minds know that we're not doing any harm, but we're also not doing you any favors.
Mm,
But I
that's
think you
really good.
pointed out to the identity and the
That's really
stubbornness,
good.
and until you recognize that your body is actually failing you, and that
Mm,
it's not what it was in the summer of 2008 when you came in as a rip roaring freshman, as healthy as you ever were going to be in football. It's really hard, and I'm not going to tear down someone's identity because that's the last thing I want to try to combat because it just becomes a fight, right?
mm,
It just becomes a, you don't know me, you don't know who I am, you don't know what I stand. I'm not going to play that game. I've done
yeah,
it with some athlete and it doesn't work, right? So I'm going to
yeah,
stick to what I know, and I know medicine and sports medicine, athletic training pretty well. And so let's do everything we can to help you try to reach those goals and objectives. It's going to be safe. That's within the evidence. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make sure I'm there to help move you along and let you know that it's okay. Because I think that you talked about that. Yeah, I'm also the guy that is sitting in a room with Doc, and Doc looks at you and says, "Eh, you're done. You're
mm,
not doing it anymore." And I mean, think about it. It's October, right now, and so middle of October, a normal football season. Where are we at? How many games in are we? So in a normal season, I mean,
mm,
think about not only do you have an injury, but you're like physically and mentally exhausted,
mm,
right? So I mean, compare where you are in season to where you are beforehand when mentally you feel healthy. I
mm,
mean, where were you at that during that time? I mean, because I know what I saw, but I only see what you're telling me and maybe what I'm picking up with body language, but it's got to be a whole different story going on in your head. And I can only imagine what's rolling around your head when Doc and I are standing there looking at you going, Stints, stints, you're done, buddy. There's nothing more we can do. We've done this, we've done that, we've done everything. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what's going through my head. I'll show you. Like I'll show you that I'll come back. And so this is the perfect segue to just go there. So I get, I don't know. I was trying to impress the upperclassmen, and instead of lifting freshman weight, I hopped on the rack to squat, which I shouldn't have been squatting. I wasn't clear to squat, but to squat their weight, and came up kind of wrong, and that's when probably the injury occurred. But I went months on this injury, and I would come in, and we were doing all the things we could, and I didn't know the difference between being hurt and being injured.
right.
So, and this is a whole long story of, and you mentioned something that I think is important, and it's the transparency of the athlete with the trainer, because there is this unspoken reality of, if you tell them the real truth about your body, they're going to err on the side of caution. But when you're really dedicated to your team, you don't want to err on the side of caution. You want to know, like, if there is 10% chance that I can play and won't get hurt, I'm getting in the game. Hence situations like Kevin Durant, right? So, I ended up, long story short, I ended up, going on that injury, and it got really bad. I was, missing multiple practices. I'm, taking painkillers. I'm making trips to the hospital. Finally get the MRI, and they're like, Dr. Shell out of Saginaw was like, dude, you need to come have emergency surgery. Your left leg has so much atrophy, it's going to go paralyzed, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to see that sometimes as a trainer without an MRI, because you're assessing physical performance. But for a person like me who's talented and can still win in sprints, can still lift and be competitive, it's kind of like, is this guy injured or is he hurt? Right?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell without looking at the data. So I get the surgery, and I can't remember if it was you and Greg in the room, but I vividly remember the news of, here's our recommendation. You are a freshman, and you have your entire life ahead of you. And here's the part where I mentioned in the book, you said something that came true. You said, I want you to really think hard about this, Stins. You said, do you want to be able to hold your daughters one day? And I remember thinking, like, dude, what? I'm not hold my daughters. I'm trying to play football. Like, what do I need to do to play? And I don't remember like step by step the process, but I do remember my decision. I left there pissed. I came back. I went to coach. I yelled. I got second, third opinions, and I just wanted to prove everybody wrong. So then finally, I don't know who I convinced, probably the coach, to give me an opportunity. I signed a liability waiver so that, the university wouldn't be liable for my injury. And then I began this gruesome process of jumping back out there and putting my body through tournament, and ended up, starting things. But I want to pause right there and just say, what was your perspective on the play-by-play?
Yeah. So as I look, and again, it's weird how you start to talk a little bit and you go, yeah, I remember you laying on the table, but I also remember watching a slow progression of leg weakness, right? And I remember, and you didn't complain, you never said you were in pain. It doesn't feel great. I'm not 100%, but I can do it. And I can remember a number of times we would look, and I think finally it was when just the leg. I mean, there were some clinical signs that you could not hide anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was clearly evident that we had to stop and run a different course.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that as we're going through that, in my mind, as someone who's like, he's tearing up his body, right? And it's not that we're not recognizing it. Some of it is, how do we slow him down?
Mm-hmm.
And we only have so much control, and so we'll help, and we're trying to ease pain, and we're trying to do some things that you know we could to help, but at the same time, when sometimes it's just you're injured, right? So we manage it. We try to get you stronger. We try to get you back on the field, but this time of year, we got, 104 other individuals that we're also caring for. And that's not to minimize any one person's. It's just, as we look at the whole system and as you say, the play by play, there comes a point in time where, we've got to shelf this guy because he's not helping himself. And so, you reach out and you have some doctors do some peer to peer and what have you. And, our response to that is, well, how do we care for him? How do we show him that this is not Phil versus Darryll.
Mm-hmm.
This is Darryll versus back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that when you mention the comment, and I've said that comment to others, and some of the ththings I say, the wheelchair thing, and some of that, you say kind of flip it, and at the time, because quite frankly, you're looking at me, and you're still in disbelief, right? You still don't believe after major surgery, after multiple months of rehabilitation and not getting better, that your dream is over,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do we convince you, and so then it's like, at the end of the day, I've got to look out for what are your long-term goals, what do you want to do when you grow up.
Right.
And yeah.
You know, man. Like, you see who it is?
No, who is it?
What's good, dude?
Holy smokes.
What's up, man?
Blast from the past. How are you, buddy?
I can't hear him. He said blast from the past already. That's right, bro. It's good.
I would say it's all good, man. It's funny. Anytime any of my past comes, you probably can't hear, can you? Now you can hear?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, cool. It's great to see guys when they come back, right? And it reminds me that since when we talk about like that, do you ever really want to hold your daughters? That's my job, right? That's my job to make sure that we can have guys come back for homecomings. We can have guys be successful in their careers. We can have guys go and do great things despite the adversity they may face in college. And so it's like, oh my God. Every time you guys come back, every time I see a former athlete or somebody, and when my worlds collide, when like my Spectrum Health world collides with my Central Michigan world or former students or former athletes, you feel good, right? You feel good to see when guys grow up, right? When they start to do, I mean, cool life living still. That's fantastic. I love it.
I don't know if you remember this, but it's a story similar to Darryl's. You actually impacted me launching that. I don't know if you remember, but I was sitting on the training table and I had just torn my meniscus in my left knee. And I think the MRI came back and you looked at me and you said, hey, if you keep this up, you're going to need knee replacements by the time you're 40. Like it was real. It was real. But like that thought of like being like, I mean, just being honest, like at that point, I didn't really love football anymore. I knew I wanted to do something in business, and that kind of just tipped the scale. And it was just like, man, you know what? Let me do what I want to do, and I want to be able to play with my son. Which I have a son and a daughter now, so it all worked out. I appreciate your candor in that moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my play, and I think that's interesting that you remember that and recognize that, and again, I think my hope was that as you guys progress through injuries and as we develop these relationships, that you guys would remember ultimately that never made you do anything you didn't want to do, probably stopped you from doing a lot of things that you really wanted to do, but I did it because I cared. I cared about you as students, cared about you as athletes, and long term, I did not want you to look back and go, well, if that darn trainer just would have said no, or just would have stopped me, or just wouldn't have let me, or what have you. There's a balance between letting you guys pursue your own success at the risk of imminent failure.
Yeah.
And to be just honest with people and look at guys and go, knee replacements? I mean, really, do you want to do this? How many surgeries do you have to have? You know,
Yeah.
how much physical abuse, and not in the terms of like illegal abuse, but how much you have to torture your body to prove to yourself that maybe this isn't the way to go.
Yeah.
You know, and that's hard, and I recognize that. I mean, it's different with a high school student, and I look back at our high school students, and I have a little different perspective now, in that I think that high school is we have to be a little bit more protective, um, and I'm really appreciative of the NCAA and the attempt at separating the medical from the coaching and the administrative. We didn't have that, right? When you guys were in school, that wasn't a thing, right? So it was oftentimes, and it wasn't. There was nothing ever said necessarily that someone has to be on the field. But there was always pressure. And so if I could take some of that pressure from you, not screen, not lie, but if I could take some pressure off you guys so that you guys could do what you need to do, I got broad shoulders. I can hack that. It's no big deal.
Well, we definitely
Right?
appreciate you, man. Yeah,
Oh man, that's
um,
fantastic.
yeah, like I referenced that situation. Like anytime I tell my story of like going from being an athlete to just a young business owner, you know, still on a college campus, and like your name is brought up. It's just like in that moment you were being real and you cared about who I would become, not just who I was in that moment. And I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And again, I look and go, I mean that I didn't. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud. I mean, you could go down the list of guys, and not just those guys who might have achieved, you know, in their sport careers and what have you. But if you look at the amazing, I honest to God am blessed to have been at Central Michigan with the people that I was surrounded with the athletes that we were surrounded with, because even some of you that didn't necessarily succeed athletically, you could run down the list of
Mhm.
guys and how successful you are despite, and maybe, and I there's a part of me that thinks that it was that obstacle, overcoming that barrier of being injured, and Stints, as you said, overcoming that athlete identity and that loss of an identity that really allowed you to find that the real identity that you maybe weren't realizing you were seeking. And I know we always had a lot of conversations in the athletic training room about that. Is okay, if this doesn't work out, what are you going to do instead? Where you want to go, right? You know, and I think it was shortly after the knee replacement comment that, I mean, it didn't take long for you to start the little business and to get involved and start in that. It was quick.
Yeah.
Because it was like not long after that you decided I'm going to hang it up, and all of a sudden everybody in the locker rooms running around with Cool Life Living shirts and just a total. I'm like, what is this Cool Life? I'm cool. I mean, it's like, yeah, no, I started a business, and you know, and but that's the point, right? Somehow you were able to take that athletic identity, take your injury and that obstacle of an injury, and overcome that hurdle, and somehow we were able to bridge that gap where you didn't disengage from what was next,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is probably where that my work, that's really what prompted me to work on my dissertation and some of the doctoral work I did, um, was that I saw guy after guy after guy fail out of school, fail a semester, go on academic probation because they got hurt, right? They had nothing to play for.
Mhm.
And it was, I'm not going to go into all the literature. I'll bore you to tears about the literature, but the one thing that I based my dissertation on was really a feedback loop, and it was an engagement feedback loop. And what happens is for students, any student, to be successful, they need somebody to help connect the dots for them. And what my thinking is maybe for athletes and their engagement, whether that be to return to athletics or just academics and life, what happens when that person isn't there to create the engagement, right? And so what you guys are describing is that moment in time where I happen to hit a button. I hit I connected a dot, right? We went from my athlete identity's gone, my world is falling apart, to I gotcha. Let's get you from here. Let's get you over here so that you can continue to get better and move through that rehabilitation cycle. And what I would say is my findings from that research was very evident that when you take that person out, or when there is an absence of that individual to help complete that loop, that's where that disengagement occurs. Right. And so when I think, Stints, about your story, and I think about the hardship you have, at what point in time did that darkness really creep in? And because there was a period of time I didn't see you, right? And I don't remember what happened to Darryll. You were out of the training room, you were kind of doing your rehab thing, you were out of whatever. So what happened? What happens to any of you guys when? And that's why we got to come to treatment. We always got to be in the training room. I got to and you start to realize that frequent engagement, the frequent positive feedback, those interactions that help keep you grounded and help you move from that athletic identity to what your mature identity may be. That may be part of the needs of, among other things, of those athletes that have these issues after injury. And I didn't do a study in the college level. I'm curious to see if it would ever be done. But I can tell you that it would not surprise me if we polled all of the folks that you come in contact, or future individuals that are moved by the work that you're doing, Darryll, that there's usually a point in time, a person that connected those dots, that preserved that engagement. And when they didn't have that engagement is when the darkness and some of the bad stories start to develop.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, that's
all right. Take care, Phil.
Good to see you. Holy smokes.
It's crazy, right? So for those of you who have no clue what's going on right now, that's my one of my best friends, Nick, and he played football with me at Central Michigan University. So that's how he knows Phil. And you heard about the knee injury thing. And so he was done a lot sooner than I was, because he did the right thing. And he didn't sign a liability waiver, and he lived to tell the story. So this is a good segue into one of the things I wanted to get into. I want to talk a little bit more about your research, but it's in my, so one of the things that when you talk about when that darkness creeps in, and I think engagement is something we measure. And we have been using a tool. It's similar to the AIM scale, but it's based upon our research of working with the athletes we worked with. Me and my friend Ryan just was like, hey, how are we able to identify if an athlete has too high of an athletic identity, is the term that we used at the time. And we would do this little makeshift PDF assessment, and it was pretty successful at saying, hey, the guys that I can tell aren't really listening when we come in and talk transition are the guys who test out high on athletic identity, because they just can't see around it, right? They're like, you're talking to everybody but me, because I'm the the next best thing. And so it has always been in my heart and vision to make mental health examinations required like physical health examinations are, right? So that when you come and you have to take a physical to get cleared for sport, you also have to take an identity assessment and a mental health assessment to see where you are. And I think that would help us to really shift and identify the darkness as well as the engagement, right? And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on testing mental and physical health for athletes?
Oh my goodness, I think it's a missing link, right? I think that what the one of our coaches used to say, the mental is to the physical as 2 is to 1, right? I mean, it was the thing. It was up on the walls, right? And it's interesting you mentioned that, because all 3 of the collegiate coaches I worked under all preached mental toughness. Right. And as an athlete, you're told mental toughness, overcome some of those push your bodies further than you can.
Yeah.
But how do we know if we don't have some sort of we do baseline concussion testing, we do baseline jump testing. You think of the strength coaches, they're doing baseline strength testing, but we never really understand where athletes are mentally. Right. But I think that we've been so focused on physical strength I think we've been focused on lifestyle, so diet, nutrition.
Mhm.
What are we fueling our body with? And we've really left the mental health aspect out. And I think that it's really been within the last couple years that we've started to see um, a need, not so much for sports psychology in the terms of dealing with performance anxiety and some of the things that come along with being an athlete.
Mhm.
It's some of the non-athletic, non-sport psychology things that how awesome would it be if everybody had access to a licensed social worker? I would have loved to have somebody so I didn't have to be the guy in the room having some of the hard conversations going, well, I don't know that I can necessarily give you guidance and I'm not equipped to do that, but I can listen and let's try, and how do I identify with the training that I have those folks that we really need to find somebody to talk and then to find somebody to talk to, right? And how would I
Yeah.
know if I don't have any I think you guys are absolutely onto something. I think that if we're not doing some sort of a mental health examination, that we're really missing a key component of athletic performance, of the athletic identity for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and this is a good time to just share even how more because this was something that we've done, and AIMS is a good scale, but we've identified through our research a couple of additional metrics that help us in our process that we walk athletes through to either prepare for transition or adjust to life after sports. And I was like, man, I would love to like have this officially tested by science, and I'd love to have this be an assessment that takes 10 minutes or less to complete via digital mobile device. And one day, 10 years and hundreds of $1,000s later, and lo and behold, I run into a guy by the name of Dr. Richard Schuster, who we did we have him on? I think we already had him on part of our live series, and he's got an assessment called the Powers Assessment, and it helps with entrepreneur and CEO work life balance. But he has a version for the athlete called the Powers Athlete. He shares this with me, and it assesses an athlete's on the field performance and off the field performance so that they can begin to make adjustments. And so it's a great tool to help athletes be successful on and off the field. I take the assessment to see if it'll be a good fit for a resource that additionally helps our athletes. And I go, this is phenomenal. The only thing that's missing is this makeshift PDF scale that we have. And he read it and he said, this is phenomenal. I'd love to partner. So
That's
he
awesome.
goes, gets it tested by scientists, runs it through all this like actual research and validates and picks some things apart and comes up with the correct terminologies. And now it's a part of the assessment. And so it's just crazy. Something that I thought was going to take, ten thousands of dollars, hundreds of $1,000s in 10 years, is available now,
That's
right?
awesome.
And so what I love about Dr. Richard is his goal is to use it to transform the planet. And so he wants to give a percentage of the proceeds back to inner city youth and kids in Africa who sport is their only means to develop character or life skills.
Yeah.
He made the assessment god awful cheap. It's $47, I think. And so he's just a phenomenal human being. So anyways, I just wanted to plug that. And you guys can reach out to us if you want to take that assessment. But I want to share with you offline, Phil. I want to get into your research and what have you found uh, talk engagement, but public as part of your research, some things that you're currently thinking about that can help the overall well-being of athletes.
Yeah. Give me that. Hit me with that one more time since you broke up just a little
Did we
bit.
lose
I
them?
want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. I said, based upon your research, I'm transitioning back into your research, and I want to know,
yep.
like, do you have additional thoughts you want to share, or things that you kind of want to look into for the future that will help the overall well-being of athletes?
Yeah, if I had all of the time in the world and the research capabilities and what have you, I think that I would probably dive in some more. I'd like to replicate the study in the college level. if at all possible, to understand the engagement. And um, I think from an engagement standpoint, there's multiple avenues that we could go into with, whether it's, you start to get into attachment, and you could take this, you could chase squirrels all day. I think what I was most, out of my research, what I really was most wanting to understand is, what does that athletic healthcare team look like? And how do we put all of those things behind student athletes, to help them be successful on and off the field? And it's almost a mythical construct to think that everybody has access to athletic trainer, team physician, registered dietitian, licensed social worker, nurse, school-based health center, or just health center, and all of the specialists. You've got an orthopedic surgeon, you got a non-operative orthopedist, you've got someone who does neuropsychology that pairs with your non-op for. Not everybody has access to that, and so what I would love to know is, based on where gaps are we missing some of that engagement with athletes because we have gaps in the athletic healthcare team? And it really kind of goes back to when I was working on my doctoral work. I could have gone in 100 directions, right? And I had my advisor looked at me. He basically looked at me and said, "Focus. What is the one brick in the wall that you're trying to add to the body of research?"
Hmm.
And I was like,
Yeah, that's good
wow,
advice.
right? So when you're talking about your um the study and getting the tool developed, I'm like, yeah, that'd be awesome. That's not my wheelhouse, right? How
Hmm.
cool would it be to integrate that, and I start to have all these research ideas go through, and how do we do this, and we could put it through all. That's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is the athletic healthcare team, and making sure that student athletes and parents have the resources they need and the support they need to create engagement to be successful. And success isn't necessarily always getting back on the field, or back to
Right,
competition.
right. That's so important, man. I'm blown away. I probably could talk for hours and hours about this, but I want to respect your time and the time of our guest. And I'll kind of, close the loop here a little bit. So I'll backtrack us back to the story. So I injured, signed a liability waiver. I come back to play. You're obviously in disagreement
I
with
wasn't happy. Let's just say I wasn't. I know Greg was not happy. I was
nobody
not
was out
happy. Doc was less than thrilled, but
there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
It's my decision, and I begged, and I signed the liability waiver. And I think from my perspective, and I realize that it's just my perspective, and I talk about this in our book. I From my perspective, it was the world was against me. Like, nobody wanted me. I don't think there was anybody who was forcing me to play, because I really hadn't proven myself. I mean, I had a lot of potential, but I hadn't done a lot on the field. So there was no real loss of the team, other than, like, hey, a guy that could have, should have, would have maybe been. But I wanted to prove that I was a guy that was.
mhm.
And so I think when I signed that liability waiver, I don't think anybody was like rooting for me to make it. I think they were going to think I was going to go out there like Josh Allison, who had a very similar surgery to mine, and I was just going to bomb and tank. Like, my body was just going to fail me. But here I am, and I've got to say this for liability reasons, completely hiding what I'm doing behind the scenes from my athletic trainers, because I knew the moment they would have caught on to the opioids I'm taking, to the way that I found a way to manipulate the healthcare system to get multiple epidural shots in my back, and to get some steroid pain pills, that I knew the moment that they caught on to that, they were going to shut it down.
Yeah, and,
And
and and for the record, I mean, this is, I want to say, I had no knowledge of a
mm,
lot of things that Darryll has talked about, and he didn't discuss those with me, and there was a point in time when you had returned and were kind of doing your thing, where you really weren't under our care. I mean, and it wasn't that we weren't caring for you if you needed it, but you had some things to prove, and so there was just this gap period where we went from, okay, you're back, you're physically able to participate, questions about competitiveness, and so letting you do your thing on the football field. We didn't know. We had no knowledge of any of that, didn't support it, would not have supported it, and would have shut it down in a moment's notice. So I appreciate you making that statement, because I don't want anybody to think that it was certainly, passing pills under a table or leaving a medicine cabinet unlocked or anything sneaky or behind the scenes, because it's not the way we run things, and I think I hold myself to a higher standard than that. So I appreciate that, and I sometimes we forget, we start to reminisce and we talk about things and we go, yeah, in this day and age, I think it's best to make sure that we've clarified that a lot of and it came as a shock, right? We start to talk about some of the things you went through. It's like, holy cow, how did I not know, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I'll be the one to say it, and I know that this might ruffle some feathers, but to me, it's part of the conversation that doesn't come up enough. I think we, in the industry, we spend too much time blaming athletic trainers, and we never even question or examine the athlete's role. It's as almost if everything rides and falls on the athletic trainer's decision, and that's not true. Sometimes they're doing the best, and most times they're doing the best they can with the information. And I'm not saying that there aren't situations where they cover up or kind of put an athlete in a bad situation. But I would, if I had to guess, if I did an extensive study, which I haven't done, I would guess that it's usually more on the athlete side. From being a player, I can tell you that players know that the athletes have the power to, or excuse me, the athletic trainers have the power to veto them playing and them being back in the game. And so the athlete, I can tell you the number of people who have hidden how they felt, how hurt they were, because they wanted to compete. I mean, I know guys that have literally, after the game, admitted to, I'm pretty sure I had a concussion, but I just got up, shook it off, and I never, because they would have took me out the game. Yep. And I think there's something to be said about that. So I want to just caution everybody, is be careful about blaming athletic trainers for things that athletes may need to be held responsible for. And if you're an athlete and you listen to this and you're current, or if you've got sons or daughters who are playing, I just want to encourage you to ask them the real hard questions about how they feel, and ask them, have they communicated that to their healthcare team? And because somebody needs to hold them accountable, because you only can fix and help and remedy whatever the proper term is to the level of which you understand the issue. So and that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we could go down that road with I mean, you think of opioids, and you think of painkillers, and you think of the pain cycle, and there was a time when that was the fix, right? That's what everybody went to, and I remember going into some of those NFL locker rooms, and we go into NFL locker rooms, and there's the sharps boxes, and all you see is the injectable Tordals, and that's not a narcotic, but it's a painkiller, right? So we heard stories from coaches that, what do you mean we don't have guys line up for their Toradol shots before games? We just didn't believe in that. We took a much more holistic approach to sports and to athletics, and and unfortunately, guys, Darryll, like yourself, that were able to hide some things and find some things and do some things outside of earshot and view, that ended up in a bad spiral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it, man. So Phil, this has been a phenomenal conversation, man. I
could go on for hours, Stint.
I know. I'm like,
could keep you entertained for hours, but go both ways for sure.
Yeah, man. And I appreciate, and I man, I'd love to read your dissertation and your work, and to really think about how to implement some of the things you found into what we do. But man, I can't thank you enough for fighting for me. That I'll never forget. After there is hope in the story. So they end up catching on to what I was doing, and I don't know at what point. Probably when my nose started to bleed from me taking too many opioids, and I always tell the story this way. They call me in the room and they said, "Look, dude, we don't know what you're doing, but we can't let it happen." And so they kicked me off the team. It's probably not the right term, but they asked me, they restricted me from playing. And I got pissed and I just ran away and I went into a depression. And I attempted to take my life. When you talk about disengaging from the team, I disengaged from everybody. I was so mad. I felt like the athletic trainers gave up on me. I felt like my teammates gave up on me. I felt like people should have fought. I felt like we should have pulled some strings, found a different doctor who could do a different procedure. And I felt like they just wrote me off as like a dead horse. I was wrong, but that's how I felt. And, thank God I survived my suicide attempts and I lived to tell the story. And I remember holding my first daughter and experiencing all the pain in my back. My first thought was, I should have listened to my athletic trainers. And the good news is that I've been able to heal from that. I'm in a much better place and I can't pick them out without pain. I'm not to use painkillers to go to sleep anymore. So I'm in a much better place physically because of some things I've done over the years and just God's faithfulness. But if I had to title this episode, I would title it "Listen to Your Athletic Trainers."
I appreciate that. So this in the olden days, this is where you got that big old bear hug, and we get to look at your family, and we get to look back and look at the success, and we get to celebrate overcoming those obstacles.
Yeah.
And it is awesome what you're doing, Darryll. And I hope more people can hear your story and hear all the pieces of your story, because I think you're bringing hope to a lot of folks and a lot of people. And that's what we need most right now is hope and to see people be able to succeed like you have. And I mean, I can't congratulate you enough on where you're at, where you're going to go. You're still there's more great things ahead of you. And I really, really appreciate you letting me be part of your journey today.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for those kind words, guys. I want to thank you for everybody who tuned in today. Phil said something that was very kind about my story impacting the lives of others. And, when I'm not being falsely humility or falsely humble, I will admit that is part of my calling in life is to use my story to impact others. And it has. But this story is not unique to Darryll. It is something that thousands of athletes face around the world. The athlete transition industry is dramatically undersupported. And it's why I'm devoting myself to making a difference. And it's why our team is committed to seeing change happen in the mental health space and the transition space for athletes. And so anytime you hear my story, just know that I represent thousands and thousands of other athletes who are crying for help, who thought that sports was going to be their ticket to success and fame and really happiness. And it wasn't. And some of you know them. They're checking out your groceries at Publix. They are coaching your favorite high school team. They are volunteering in your community, and remind them that there's still purpose beyond sports. Help us be ambassadors of this message. Visit our website, share our blogs, reach out to our community, share this live feed. How many parents need to hear the wisdom that Phil had to share with us today? We appreciate your support, your advocacy. Thank you again, Phil, for your time today. And I'm just so excited for our next guest. Oh, look, thank you. Look, my team's like, Darryll, talk about the book launch party. Thank you. October 20th, we're doing a book launch party. I'll be streaming multiple times throughout that day, but we're going to kick off the official celebration at 6 p.m. And so you'll have an opportunity to order the book, get the bonuses and all that stuff. So we've got special guests, entertainers, like it's going to be fun. So bring your alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage, whatever your temperament is. And make sure you get the book. But our next guest is Chris Smith. He is the CEO of Athlete Network, which has a database of over 1 million athletes. He is phenomenal. I recently was featured on one of his blog articles. I wrote a post called The 5 Lies of Depression, which I encourage you guys to go read, especially no matter athlete or not. If you're struggling with depression, it's a great article to read. And he's going to come talk about transition, leadership. They do a lot of work with helping athletes find career after sports. They create custom software solutions for schools to continue to engage with their alumni athletes. So you're going to hear about all the amazing work they're doing and some ideas that we have to really make a difference together. So join us for that live stream. All the information is on our social media pages. Remember to share, and if you're watching this replay, host a watch party. Phil, once again, thank you so much. And guys, we will see you on the next stream.